Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your EyeOpener report from BoilingFrogsPost.com. Last month, the former White House Counter-Terrorism Czar Richard Clarke made headlines in the alternative press when he revealed that the CIA's failure to pass on information it knew about two of the alleged 9/11 hijackers living in the United States for over a year before the attacks, long known and discussed amongst 9/11 researchers, but never mentioned in mainstream discussions of the subject, did not merely involve a few lowly CIA analysts who did not understand the importance of the information, but instead extended all the way to former CIA Director George Tenet. The explosive comments, virtually ignored in the establishment media, were made to a documentary film crew during an interview for an upcoming documentary on the CIA's pre-9/11 intelligence failures.
For me, to this day, it is inexplicable why, when I had every other detail about everything related to terrorism, that the director didn't tell me, that the director of the Counter-Terrorism Center didn't tell me, that the other 48 people in CIA who knew about it never mentioned it to me or anyone in my staff in a period of over 12 months.
They were stopped from getting to you and stopped from getting to the White House then?
And stopped from getting to the FBI and the Defense Department. We therefore conclude that there was a high-level decision in the CIA ordering people not to share that information.
How high level?
I would think it would have to be made by the director.
The claim that the Director of Central Intelligence knowingly and purposely blocked the White House Counter-Terrorism Czar and high-level FBI officials from learning about known al-Qaeda agents living in the United States is profound in its implications. Given that any interpretation of this assertion would necessarily mean that Tenet and the other CIA officials who blocked this information actually aided the alleged 9/11 attackers and have now participated in a decade-long cover-up of their role, the question necessarily becomes, why did they do this? Clarke provided his own completely speculative and non-evidence-based answer to this question for the documentary cameras.
I have thought about this a lot, and there's only one conceivable reason that I've been able to come up with. Now, there may be other reasons, but I've only been able to come up with one. When Cofer Black became the head of the Counterterrorism Center at CIA, he was aghast that they had no sources in al-Qaeda. So he told me, I'm going to try to get sources in al-Qaeda. I can understand them possibly saying, we need to develop sources inside al-Qaeda. When we do that, we can't tell anybody about it. And I can understand them perhaps seeing these two guys show up in the United States and thinking, aha, this is our chance to flip them. This is our chance to get guys inside al-Qaeda. And to do that, we can't tell anybody. So we do know that these two guys show up in Southern California, and pretty soon thereafter they're approached by a Saudi. We know the Saudi reaches out, meets them in a restaurant, arranges housing for them, arranges payment to them, arranges to move them to San Diego. And that Saudi has connections to the Saudi government, and some people believe that guy was a Saudi intelligence officer.
In Clarke's view, then, the CIA was doing its best to attempt to recruit these al-Qaeda terrorists, but Saudi intelligence, perhaps working as the terrorist handlers, didn't manage to, or didn't attempt to, flip them in time. On the face of it, this explanation for the monumental criminal cover-up Clarke has just exposed seems to fit in with a pattern of information suggesting the good intentions of the CIA and the dastardly double-dealing of the Saudis. Osama bin Laden, after all, was a Saudi, and 15 of the alleged 9/11 hijackers were allegedly carrying Saudi passports. In the immediate wake of the attacks, the FBI infamously cleared numerous members of the Saudi bin Laden family, as well as Saudi royals, to fly out of the country. It has been an open secret for some time that the 28 redacted pages of the Joint Congressional Inquiry into 9/11, referring to foreign government involvement in the attacks, in fact refers to Saudi Arabia. But this pattern, according to 9/11 researchers like Kevin Ryan, is in fact a false trail, carefully constructed as a get-into Saudi Arabia free card for America to use at a convenient time whenever the official story of 9/11, as represented in the 9/11 Commission report, begins to fall apart under the weight of its own lies and obfuscations, or whenever the establishment deems it necessary to motivate the American people into yet another war of conquest for the purpose of securing the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Earlier this week, I had the chance to talk to Kevin Ryan about the suggestion that the Saudis were the true masterminds of 9/11, and what purpose this carefully constructed trail of evidence serves.
I've always kind of seen the 28 pages that were redacted from the Joint Congressional Inquiry, as well as a lot of what the 9/11 Commission says, with the 15 of the 19 hijackers being from Saudi Arabia and so forth. I've seen that as kind of being a dormant, what I call a get into Saudi Arabia free card. You know, at some point, people will recognize that really the people who ostensibly attacked us on 9/11, a case could be made that that was the Saudi Arabian government or the Saudi Arabian people, which I wouldn't say, of course. There's a clear disconnect between the Saudi Arabian royal family and the people of Saudi Arabia. They're not very representative of their people at all, but they are representative of Western governments and Western powers and sort of deep state operatives like the Bush family and their colleagues. So I think that yeah, you could call it as a limited hangout to some extent, but I think it's also kind of a diversion that they can get people that enough people can kind of agree to, so that if it's necessary to invade and occupy Saudi Arabia, because of course that's where the world's greatest oil reserves lie, by the way. Iraq is a number 2 on that count. And Iran, of course, is very close there. But Saudi Arabia still has the largest oil reserves in the world, and a lot of people have noticed that Al-Qaeda, whoever they are, seem to concentrate on either attacks or either attacks concentrated on, or their members originate from areas where we have these most strategically important resources, whether it be natural gas or oil or minerals and so forth. So, yeah, I think that it's possible that it's been planned in advance, that there'll be a story that will lead us eventually to invade Saudi Arabia, and it might be a good idea for people to learn as much as they can about who's really been behind the Saudi Arabian government and supported them for the last many decades.
If the case of al-Hazmi and al-Midhar is not quite as simple as Clarke suggests, then, if it is not merely a case of well-meaning CIA officials trying to flip these terrorists and instead being duped by Saudi intelligence, then what is the explanation for Tenet's duplicity? Why would the CIA have actively prevented other intelligence officials from learning of key information which, by Clarke's own admission, would have led to the FBI rounding up the 2 alleged hijackers and unraveling the 9/11 plot within 24 hours? The only other logical explanation is in fact the most straightforward one, that the CIA in fact wanted the plot to go ahead. As researcher, author, and activist David Swanson puts it in a recent article on the case, what if, just as Obama's actions make sense when we stop fantasizing about him being a liberal, Tenet's actions make sense when we stop assuming his top priority was protecting the people of this country? Although a radical-sounding suggestion to those who only receive information from the carefully controlled news programs of the corporate-controlled and foundation-funded media, the suggestion that the alleged 9/11 attackers were actively aided every step of the way by complicit high-level officials in key positions in the intelligence community is in fact one that is borne out by a much more detailed pattern of information than the one suggesting Saudi involvement. In the mid-1990s, the NSA began monitoring communications at a suspected al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. Despite having access to this incredibly important intelligence, the NSA did not even inform the CIA of the existence of the hub, and once the CIA became aware of it, they refused to share any information from their wiretaps. In the late 1990s, FBI agent Robert Wright's investigation into terrorist financing started to connect the funding for attacks like the 1998 embassy bombings to Yassin al-Qadi, a wealthy financier who, amongst other things, was one of the founding investors in P-Tech, an enterprise software company with a who's who list of government clients who happened to be running tests on FAA NORAD system interoperability in the basement of the Pentagon on the morning of 9/11. When attempting to launch an official investigation into the African embassy money trail, Wright's supervisor reportedly flew into a rage, saying, "You will not open criminal investigations. I forbid any of you. You will not open criminal investigations against any of these intelligence subjects." Earlier this year, it was revealed that the Asymmetric Threats Division, an elite intelligence unit within the Joint Forces Intelligence Command that had been tracking bin Laden since 1999, was ordered to stop their activities and curtail their efforts to monitor Afghan training camps shortly before the 9/11 attacks. A secret defense intelligence unit codenamed Able Danger identified supposed 9/11 ringleader Mohammed Atta no less than 13 times prior to the attacks. According to one intelligence official with knowledge of the program, when shown pictures of suspected terrorist operatives in the US, ranking officials placed yellow sticky notes over the faces of Atta and several others as a way to denote that these operatives were not to be tracked. In mid-2000, Army Intelligence and Security Command General Counsel Tony Gentry ordered the program's data, some 2.5 terabytes worth, deleted. When program whistleblower Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who was ignored by the 9/11 Commission, attempted to publish a book about his experiences working for Able Danger, the Pentagon itself bought the entire first print run of the book and burnt them. In the weeks leading up to the attacks, Minneapolis FBI agents eager to examine the possessions of Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker who had been arrested while attempting to secure flying lessons for large commercial aircraft, were frustrated by numerous roadblocks thrown up by FBI supervisors in their investigation. Roadblocks the agents themselves identified as acts of sabotage. Several of the agents joked that key officials in Washington had to be spies or moles working for Osama bin Laden. Although incompetence, short-sightedness, bureaucratic infighting, and now, with Richard Clarke's recent speculation, secret agent double-dealings gone wrong, are typically used to explain away one or two acts of incompetence, what these and the many, many other pieces of evidence reveal is how these are not random acts of oversight, but in fact a pattern. In the light of this information, the idea that every single attempt to identify and disrupt the alleged perpetrators of the 9/11 plot failed because of incompetence begins to strain the bonds of credulity under the much simpler explanation that these operatives were in fact being assisted and protected every step of the way. Yet still, this line of thought is beyond the pale of serious discourse on the road to 9/11, even amongst the vast majority of the supposedly alternative media. In an ideal world, mainstream journalists would be using the opportunity presented by Clarke's recent revelations to begin asking the hard questions about 9/11. Kevin Ryan himself posed a list of questions that any serious journalist would ask Clarke if they were trying to really understand the context of 9/11. These questions include: why did you vote down the CIA plan to kill or capture bin Laden while he was hunting with UAE royals in February 1999? Why did you expose the CIA's secret plan, without approval from the CIA or the president, to kill or capture bin Laden in March 1999, as he was meeting with UAE royals again? Did you ever communicate with NSA Director Michael Hayden between January 2000 and the attacks of 9/11? If so, why did you not, in your recent interview, accuse him of withholding information on al-Hazmi and al-Midhar? He has spoken openly of having known about their presence in the US and said that he did share it with the intelligence community. You appear to be saying that neither you nor the FBI knew that al-Midhar and al-Hazmi lived with Abdussadar Sheikh, a tested FBI asset, for at least 4 months in the year 2000. Is that correct? And if so, don't you think that contradicts your claim in this interview that, I know how all this stuff works, I've been working it for 30 years, you can't snowball me on this stuff? Until such time as so-called journalists begin asking these types of questions, interested citizens will have to continue looking for such information from the alternative media.
This video is part of a new weekly video news series. Future editions of this series will be available to subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more news and commentary from James Corbett, please visit CorbettReport.com.